That's no good. We'll just tuck that back in there. Well, I hate to burst every Land Rover hater's bubble. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. Last time you saw this BMW, obviously it wasn't running, and the BMW dealer told my friend that this thing needed an engine. Today, let's find out if that was the truth or if we were able to save them a pile of cash. We're gonna hope for the latter. But we'll get to why they think it needs an engine here in just a second. I don't necessarily think that, but we do know it needs at least timing chains. A fair amount of you have come to my channel because of the various Land Rover LR4 timing chain videos that I have. Well, I hate to burst every Land Rover hater's bubble, but they aren't the only ones that can't get the timing chain stuff just quite right. These 4-cylinder N20, N26 BMWs, especially in the 2012, 13, and years around that, are notorious for timing chain failures. So we know this particular one needs at least timing chains. Dealer says it needs an engine. Let's figure out which one of those it is, or is it somewhere in the middle? Their diagnosis was this is in need of a complete engine. The problem with that is a complete engine replacement from the dealer is going to probably be $15,000, which is pretty much what this car is worth. Therefore, that doesn't make any sense to do. And the dealer was kind enough to leave this guy out, and this was their reasoning for it needing an engine, which is funny because this is my reasoning for this not needing a complete engine replacement. Although obviously not ideal, the amount of scoring on this aluminum cam cap doesn't look like a massive amount of oil starvation to me. You can just barely catch 2 of the score marks with the old fingernail. But after having several 100,000+ mile engines like this apart, that type of scoring has been pretty typical on the newer vehicles that are having the extended 15,000 mile oil change service. There's just bound to be some junk going through the engine. And the good news is that cam cap, after pulling the rest of them off, was the worst of all of them. So I don't feel that this 122,000 mile engine is going to see any major ill effects from that, especially at the dollar amount it would be to remedy it. Pretty much every N20, N26 BMW engine we've had apart for timing chains looks exactly the same, and there's been plenty of those with 50,000+ miles put on them after the repair without problem. My big annoyance with them at the moment is they reassembled the entire upper end of this engine. I have a video where they had the valve cover off to obviously check out the chains, and of course they had the valve cover off because they had this cam cap off, but they purposely did not put the cam cap back on. You're gonna have to go in and replace this anyways. So in my opinion, all they did by reassembling this all back to where it's supposed to be is soak up some billable hours that they could charge because they weren't getting the repair job itself. A little bit of a gripe. I think that was kind of a skeezy thing to do, but that's neither here nor there. Hopefully we can save them a bunch more money. But we have repaired a bunch of these N20 and N26 engines because of the poor timing chains in the early ones. And the first thing we do to see what we're working with is rip this valve cover off. So what we're going to do, get the camshafts off, and that way all the valves will be in the closed position, and we'll go ahead and do a leak down test and see what we're dealing with for bent valves. Every once in a while, some of these get lucky and just jump enough time to not run without bending the valves. A lot of times they bend the valves, but this will give us the health of the engine and tell us whether or not the cylinder head is going to have to come off, so we know what we're dealing with. I guess they kind of put it back together. So for those of you who watched the LR4 timing chain video, you remember the fuel injectors were a big pain in that one because they're direct injectors right into the cylinder, and they were tough to get out. This one also has direct injection, but BMW made life easy, and you see the big cutouts in the valve cover. They can stay in place while getting the valve cover off, so we don't have to fight those right at the moment, even though these typically come out pretty easily. So this is the vacuum pump, and it sits on the back side of the engine. It has 3 bolts, and it's pretty tight to get in there, and these were only put back in finger tight, which is fine because it has to come apart again anyways, but why even bother doing the rest? I mean, I guess at least it made my job a little bit easier. Like I said, annoying. That's no good. We'll just tuck that back in there. So just went to pull the spark plugs so I could set the engine at top dead center, and they're missing. We put the ignition coils in, but no plugs. Then on top of that, we didn't give the plugs back to the customer. Real nice job. All right, so now that both the camshafts are out of the way, theoretically all our valves should be closed and sealed up because we have no pressure placed down onto the top of them anymore. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is something called a leak down test. It's similar to a compression test, but we use compressed air in one side, and then the compressed air feeds into the cylinder through the spark plug hole, and we're gonna put 100 PSI in there, which in turn puts 100 PSI into the cylinder. If everything is good and the valves are not bent, we won't have a massive leak, and it should hold somewhere between 90 and 100 PSI for a nice, healthy engine. Being this is direct injected, I had to put the fuel injectors back in. Otherwise, we'd have a massive compression leak right there. Nice thing about this is if there is a leak, we'll be able to hear where it's coming from. If it's leaking through the rings or the cylinder wall, we'll hear air coming out of the crankcase. If it's an intake valve, we'll hear it coming back out of the intake side. And if it's an exhaust valve, we'll hear air pushing through the exhaust. Throw a little air at it, and we're up to 100 PSI, and we're building pressure, and we're right at about 90. So that right there is some good news. Cylinder number one, no bent valves. If any of them were bent in that cylinder, they wouldn't be sealed up. We would have heard air pushing out all over. So I'm guessing this didn't happen at high RPM. So we still have a chance. We'll just keep checking. And cylinder two, perfect. Lucky number three. 3 down. 1 to go. Fingers crossed. And ladies and gentlemen, we just saved a boatload of money. So not only does it not need an engine, we don't even have to pull the cylinder head off. No vent valves. This thing just jumped timing enough so it wouldn't restart. This is obviously best case scenario. We're still gonna have to pull the oil pan off, clean out the bottom of the pan. There's gonna be some broken plastic bits from this guide that broke. But other than that, this is just a straightforward timing chain job. So now that we got it figured out that it does not need an engine and the cylinder head does not need to come off, we get to start the funnest part. Funnest? Most fun? The most fun part of this job. And I'm saying that sarcastically because this particular 3 Series is an xDrive one, or all-wheel drive in non-BMW speak, which is nice for the Iowa winters around here, but for Joe, who has to pull the oil pan, not so fun. Front differential is bolted to the oil pan. That means axles have to come out, differential off, and to do that, we have to drop the subframe. Yay. If you happen to have a rear wheel drive one, this is a much easier task because you can kind of just jack up the motor a little bit and you're able to slide the oil pan out without removing the subframe. This will be the first one of these that I do on the ground. Normally have a hoist. Almost looking forward to it. Not quite. But I guess sitting here whining isn't going to do anything. Let's get the quick jacks in place. Those were tight enough. So that was a little bit of a puzzle, getting the front differential out. We left the subframe in place, which doesn't really give you enough room, but we lifted the engine up high enough and did a little spinaroo, and we're able to snake it out without having a hoist. Leaving the subframe in place is kind of nice. That, and we shouldn't have to align this thing afterwards now. Win-win. Alright, I guess we're at a good enough point to open up our parts and make sure we got everything here. That'd be convenient. Got some timing, oil pump. That's what we need next. Crankshaft seal, oil pan gasket, valve cover gasket, and another box. Oily filter, shaft seal. Got our new fuel injector seals, sparkers, new crankshaft gear. We'll talk about that in a minute. Crank bolt, oil pump bolt. We should be good to go. So these are slightly interesting compared to most stuff that has a timing chain, in the fact that they don't have a front timing cover. It's all cast as one part of the block. Instead, they have these plugs, 3 of them. So there are our plugs, and behind those plugs are these guide rail bolts. We'll access those through the hole, pull them out, and that is what holds all the plastic timing guides in place. So we can pull our guides out. Unfortunately, we can't pull this one out from the top because it's in pieces in the oil pan. So we got our little access plug removed, and that is for our crankshaft lock. We stick this in that hole, and that'll lock it at top dead center. So you can see the tail right under the cat there. So we got that in place, and we'll make sure that's the case. Yep. No turn. Next up, we have our flywheel lock. There's an access hole on the bottom of the transmission, and that'll engage with the teeth. Then that'll lock everything down enough that we can remove our crankshaft bolt, because that guy's pretty tight. Flywheel lock is in place. Well, I knew better than to use my cheap ratchet, but I think that wasn't up to the task. Jesus. That was tight enough. Ow. So now we're at the point of going back together with everything. First up's going to be the oil pump chain assembly. It's kind of nice on these guys because it comes all pre-assembled. The first thing we have to do is install this lock pin in the balance shaft. This locks the balance shaft at the correct timing in conjunction with the crank, so we don't have any weird vibrations, because the oil pump chain also runs the balance shaft. So right there we have our balance shaft lock into the little hole, and then we have the tool that locks the gear in place. Get that whole mess of junk out of there. Ow. I wasn't expecting to break loose. We got a blood hand. We got freaking blood everywhere. So here is our oil pump and balance shaft chain system. This goes on the crankshaft, onto the balance shaft oil pump assembly. It's kind of neat how it's all one assembly, guide, tensioner, everything all in one. And even though our original one was fine, tight, and unbroken, this is still something you want to replace when you do the N20, N26 timing chain job, because this and the new timing chain gear are designed to solve one of the major downfalls of the original system and why a lot of them fail. So here is the original timing chain gear, and you can see the mating surface is smooth. And on the new one, you can see that dark line is a laser etched ring, and it is ribbed, and the oil pump gear is as well. So unlike a lot of timing systems, the crankshaft is not keyed, so it strictly relies on the friction from mounting surface to surface, with the bolt sucking it tight together to keep it from spinning. So the new updated parts have those laser etched ridges to give it a better shot at not slipping. So we're gonna get this assembly installed. We got a brand new bolt for it. And we're gonna torque that down to 95 Newton meters. We're gonna put a new one of them on, so get this out of there. So it's time to get the timing chain in place, but we're missing a very key component. So we kind of did this a little backwards. It's the way I go about life sometimes. But being as we pulled the cams to do the leak down test to check the valves, we now have to get the cam gears off. So for that, we're gonna finally put the cam lock in place. So we got our timing chain assembly all put together. It just kind of all snaps together, keeps everything in place. Obviously crankshaft, camshafts, and that guy is just gonna slide right down in there, and it'll be right in front of that oil pump chain. So we got the exhaust gear on, which is convenient because they mark it and tell you it's the exhaust one. That will take up enough of the slack in the chain that we should be able to work our little crank hub on. So we just got to thread that guy into the hole. Well, not thread, slide it into the hole. Just need to line up the two sprockets for the chains down there. So with that guy in place, we can try and finagle the other gear in. This is a little bit tricky as the chain is pretty tight, but we'll make something happen. Another hand would be fantastic. There we go. Now we can get the rest of the camshaft adjuster in place and get those guys locked down. We need to have it loose enough so the reference wheel still spins. So we obviously have a new tensioner, but that can't go in quite yet. To lock everything down, there's actually this little tensioner tool that goes in place of that and adds tension via this screw. So you screw it in the same hole and then we thread that out and that goes against the rail. So we got that guy in place. Chain is nice and tight now. These are actually reasonably simple to time as long as you have the correct tools. So this one locks the adjusters in the correct place. Got these little pins, index into these holes. So the first step on these is 55 Newton meters, blew past it, go down, 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 down. Then we got 55 degrees. So these digital torque wrenches are kind of nice. We actually went 1 degree over. It measures it. You can even ratchet back and it still counts correctly. And it shows that we tighten it to 181 Newton meters. On our way. That's the lazy man's way of doing it. Back in my day, we used to have to do it by hand and measure 60 degrees out, but I'm guessing I probably never got within 1 degree, especially when you're dealing with an oddball thing like 55. Now we're at this fun task. We get to put the crankshaft bolt in. This is probably more fun for someone that is stronger than me, because this guy's gonna take some force. So first step is 100 Newton meters. That part we can handle. Now comes the fun part. So after that 100 Newton meters, we got to do the whole torque to yield at 270 degrees. It's almost a full turn. And just as a fail-safe, even though I trust this guy, I put a paint marker on just so we can track it to make sure. 14 degrees, 47, 76. All right, so I think I'm gonna stop there. We're at 90 degrees. So we got 180 to go. Only reason is we obviously have the oil pan off, including the engine mounts. So I'm either gonna have Ted swing by to hold and counter rotate the engine, or I'll wait until I get the oil pan and the front diff back in place. I don't wanna break anything. This is Joe trying to be proactive and smart. For once. We should probably pull our balance shaft lock out. That wouldn't be great if we left that in. While we're at it, we're gonna pull the pickup tube and get that cleaned out. So we did have a little bit in there. So it's good we had to take the oil pan off so we could get that cleaned out. But it is also great to see that it wasn't completely plugged. We've had them before where one of the plastic guides disintegrates and plugs this entire thing plumb full. So there was the junk in there, much cleaner now. And there we got the bigger chunks sitting in the bottom of the pan. Those need to be evicted as well. now we get the fun of squeezing the differential back in. That wasn't too bad. So we got the engine sitting on its own mounts. Now we can go back to torquing the crankshaft bolt, which takes a little bit of effort. We did 90 degrees so far. We need 270 total, so 180 left. So we're a little over halfway there. 322 Newton meters so far. It's taking about all I got. We're getting close though. And we're there. This thing measured 440 Newton meters. Not sure what that is in American. 325 foot-pounds. That's a lot. It's stuck. All right, now we can start removing all our locks. Once we get all these guys off, we'll be able to spin the engine around, make sure everything stays in time. So we're throwing a paint marker there. We'll throw one down on the crank. We'll have to spin it around twice because the camshafts take 2 rotations to end up in this same spot. If everything lines up, we should be good to go. I'd say that's pretty good. We're happy with that. Now we can pull our tensioner tool out. And while we do that, we're going to keep tension on the guide rail with our finger until we get the new tensioner in there. This guy gets torqued to 80 Newton meters, which is quite a bit easier than the crankshaft bolt. Got a new crankshaft seal. Comes with a nifty installation cone that helps us get over the snout without tearing anything up. Because some days we need all the help we can get. If you haven't seen these, this flex fill bottle is like the second greatest invention ever. So here's some of the fluid that came out of the front differential. Being we had that guy out of there, as good a time as any to put some fresh fluid in it. The valve cover gasket was nice and soft, but we're this far, so may as well put a new one on. See if I can figure out how this thing goes. I think when we put the vacuum pump on, I think we'll actually tighten the bolts. And I think we'll actually put some spark plugs back in it. It might work a tad better with these. We got the fuel injectors. These go right into the cylinder, so they need to be able to seal up against compression. So they got these fancy little seals here, and they are one-time use only. That does require another special tool. So we got this nifty little kit here, and the first step is to use one of these guys. That goes right on the tip here to stretch the new seal over. After that, we use these 3 little pieces here, and that slowly tapers down in size with a step on each of them. Squeezes the new seal tight around the injector and allows it to fit in the hole. Not too bad of a process with the right tools. Life's much easier when you're prepared. I should probably take note of that. So I feel like I'm hosting the Grammys. Another wardrobe change. But no, just went for a run. 2 months into a 10-month training cycle. Got another 100-mile race coming up this fall. A little hard getting back in the swing of things. I'm like 8 pounds heavy. Probably more like 10 pounds if you factor the ratio of muscle to fat. More fat to muscle. We still got 8 months left. About 8 months exactly. Not worried. Why would I be worried? But no, I think we have this guy buttoned up close enough to where we can fire it off. We have one last thing. Yes! A fresh filter. That filter wrench has put a few BMW filters on in its day. And some fresh oil. We're even listening to BMW. Ah, almost perfect. Well, there's nothing left to it but to do it. See if this thing fires up. I lied. We got one more thing to do. The dealer put the transmission into neutral manually, which was helpful when we pulled this thing around. That's done by this little Allen screw, and it pushes up on a little lever up there. Alright, we should be in good shape now. With the pump and everything being removed, the fuel system was pretty well bled down. So I'm not going to pull the fuel pump fuse like I did in the LR4, because this should have quite a few cranks before it kicks off. So we should be able to get some oil pushed through the engine before it kicks off. Success. And we don't have anything gushing out the bottom. We'll give this guy a once over. Then I think we throw the rest of the covers back on and see how she drives. Much easier with the car on the ground to torque the axle bolts down. We're not fighting the wheel trying to spin then. All good. So we just put about 100 miles on this thing, and it is working flawlessly. And for supposedly needing an engine, I think this thing sounds pretty freaking fantastic. These N20s and N26s sound like a diesel engine from new. This one sounds consistent with every other one I've ran across. So today was a great day. We were able to save probably in the neighborhood of $10,000. I've never found a bad day in which you save $10,000. The other good news is we got some space back in the shop, but this whole scenario is why I'm a huge advocate of independent repair shops. I used to own one myself. I tend to find in this day and age, you find the right independent, you get much better service at a better price than going to a factory dealer. I'm not saying the dealer did anything malicious on this car. And if you crack down to it, a little bit of scoring on the cam bearing is never an ideal situation. And I guess you could say, ultimately, to be perfect warrants a new engine. But if we were to put a used engine in that thing, I guarantee those cam caps look exactly the same. But at the end of the day, a factory dealer has a massive overhead to overcome. Therefore, they need to charge some money because they need to make it. That's what they're out there for. I'm not saying making money is a bad thing. I just don't want to see people have to spend more than they need to. But with that being said, appreciate you guys following along on a BMW timing chain journey. Appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you subscribing. And we will catch you on the next one. We have the plasma table to play with. Still got the LS3 Defender. And down the road, I gotta figure out air-cooled stuff.